This is Jim Semivan, and you are listening to That UFO Podcast.
You mentioned about war with known adversaries in space, let's say US, Russia, China.
Right.
Those are the three main ones.
Yeah.
Do you think there's anything at all, and this is speculative, to putting military equipment and personnel in space to fend off or defend against unknown adversaries or anything that may be non-human related?
Yeah, this is we don't know, obvious for certain. If the Space Force had anything to do with the non-human presence, the extraterrestrial presence, they're not going to tell us. All right, that's a given. So we have to go with what we know and use our common sense. Well, first of all, there is a need for a Space Force because there is every possibility we're going to have a war in space. Not years ago, the Chinese, in order to demonstrate their abilities, sent up a missile and blew up one of their own satellites to show that they could kill satellites, right? Thus creating all kinds of space junk, which we don't need anymore. We got millions of pieces of junk up there. The United States, of course, in its infinite wisdom, responded to this provocation by what? By sending up a missile and blowing up one of our own satellites. This is how these people think. So that created even more space junk. So that was a while back. Recently, the Soviet Union actually pointed out that they are putting into, I guess, planning to put into orbit, or already have, a kind of killer satellite thing, right? Thus raising the whole idea of being able to go after satellites. This is non-trivial because, as most people know now, our civilization basically is dependent upon satellites. How that happened? Well, it took a long time, but here we are. You blow those up and a whole lot of things stop working very quickly. And of course, our defense systems, which appropriately rely heavily on satellite observation, they have cameras up there capable of reading the size of your shoe, even while your foot's in it. I mean, this kind of thing. And so you start blowing up satellites, you're actually undermining the ability of, quote, countries to defend themselves. When you didn't have satellites, it was a non-issue, wasn't it? And then they have to rely on, I don't know, telegraphs or, the social media. And so the potential for risk of a war developing in space or connected to space, like satellites being used to crack or get into systems and so forth, is there. So the idea of a Space Force that's going to address that, perfectly appropriate. Well, let me put it this way. Good idea? Well, no, the whole thing is a bad idea. And then secondly, the Pentagon is going to, you want to offer them another service? Absolutely, we'll take it.
Yeah.
Well, that's just another untold billions of dollars that they're going to get, right? So they're not going to say no. And so it was a political maneuver, certainly, in that administration, setting it up because it clearly was pleased a lot of individuals who have a tradition of supporting the party of that candidate, or that president, rather. And so, barring anything else, further evidence, I do not and cannot say that setting up the Space Force had anything to do with, quote, defending ourselves against extraterrestrials and what they might do. Though the Pentagon, even if it knew it was hopeless, meaning we cannot defend ourselves against interstellar entities. The technology they have, the abilities they have is so far above us, we simply cannot defend ourselves. But the Pentagon would be happy to take untold billions of dollars to do what is pointless, right? It's money. So they would take it. Sure, let's build a Space Force, let's put stuff on the moon, whatever. It doesn't matter that it won't make any difference. We need the money. So that is a possibility. It's all pretty crazy in a way, in my view. We need to very quickly get to a place where we do not need a Space Force and we don't need nuclear weapons. That is the real risk to us right now. So it didn't bother me that much. It was a bit of a distraction. But naturally, people that are well aware of the ET presence, very reasonably, were concerned that are they going to spend billions of dollars to, quote, defend ourselves against multiple interstellar traveling beings? I say that because I have very little confidence in the time traveling, always lived here, multi-dimensional or dimensional crossing entities. Great sci-fi, but the evidence is just simply too minuscule.
On that note, have you followed the story of the Nazca Peru mummies? And obviously the claims these things have been here for at least 1,000 years. It's a story that's gone away, came back, gone away, came back. What are your views on those?
It's interesting. It's certainly good entertainment. And fascinating in some ways, certainly. It falls kind of under the general area of ancient aliens. I believe that ETs have engaged us in the past, going back to ancient times. So in that sense, not too radical. But the fact that there's a physical thing there that can be somehow connected to something that might be ET related has got a lot of people's attention. But in terms of the disclosure process, I believe it has almost zero impact, mostly a distraction. These things are either fake or there is a completely unknown semi-homo entity or something that lived for a short while and then disappeared, except for some of these mummified remains. Or, and this is what's in play, it's a failed hybrid effort from long ago, didn't work out. They were all buried, moved on. And that's what gives it life, because the contactee evidence, the reports of the tens of thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of reports have pretty much shown that some sort of genetic work is going on that involves hybridization. This is in the reports. These are people coming back. They're not all lying. In fact, almost none of them are lying. And so that is something that they do. Could they have done it in the past? Yes. Could they have left some remnant of it? Yes. Beyond that, it's not much to say. In terms of the disclosure process, it has almost zero impact. It's extremely difficult to follow up on. We're talking about complex genetic analysis. And what does that mean? What does it not mean? And that kind of stuff in that realm, to really go anywhere, needs a whole series of substantial peer review and investigative processes that might lead to a conclusion. That is impeded by the fact that you've got two governments already battling over it. Lawsuits have been filed. And so in terms of the situation right now, it's not something that it could be excellent entertainment, but in terms of the disclosure process, I don't have any room for it. And also, I happen to think that long before the truth of all of these entities, which could be a number, there could be some fakes, there could be and some real things, who knows? Long before that is resolved, we should have disclosure. In which case, it's just one thing to investigate amongst thousands of other things as we try to sort out the history of the last 70 years, as well as the history of the human race going back to the beginning.
And one more subject to touch on before we get to some listener questions, Stephen. Lou Elizondo's book now has a date, has had in the last month or so. Imminent is due to be published imminently as we speak, around August time in the US. And I wonder, what are your expectations for Lou's book?
Oh, it's selling already. It's already pre-selling. It's selling already, pre-sales on Amazon. Imminent, Inside the Government's Hunt for UFOs. It's gonna. Lou has gone through hell for the last 7 years. He took major financial hits. I think this is going to fix all of that. Also, he has a documentary coming out almost certainly later this year, and I think that's also going to do extremely well. And so, my congratulations to Lou Elizondo. Certainly, I'm going to get this book as soon as it's available, and the doc as well. And that's just the kind of thing that we're looking forward to and expecting. And other things are happening every day, while there is still a last-ditch effort on the part of just the last holdouts, desperately trying to cling to the truth embargo to the very end. And that is going on while all these other things are just literally exploding around them.
Do you think it's coincidental timing or just good timing or deliberate timing, this book coming out? We've got James Fox documentary due, which is meant to have additional whistleblowers speaking in it potentially. You've got the rumoured David Grush op-ed that could come out at any time. That could land and pack a bit of a punch, a 1-2 blow into the disclosure process, for it. And I wonder, again, if whistleblowers come forward all in that space of a few months, that could be a real push for the disclosure movement at the right time. Do you see that as a possibility?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's not a coincidence. I mean, since 2017, we have been on a slowly, but then rapidly increasing track. I call it the last lap of the, the infinite 440, or the very long 440, the very last lap, and we're rounding that turn, or a horse race, that final turn heading for the finish line. And so as we get closer and closer to the finish line, more and more and more is happening. I mean, it's exploding. I cannot keep up with it. The amount of press coverage, the witnesses coming forward, actions in the Congress, legislation taking place. Every little thing that turns up is immediately covered. Some funny cloud, somebody puts up a balloon, anything, some odd thing happens in the backyard of somebody in Vegas or in Miami, being huge coverage. The most coverage ever in history. So far, last year I did 1,800 articles logged in, highest ever. This is triage stuff, good mainstream press, serious stuff, 1,800. Probably at this point, it's going to be looking like more like 1,500 this year. Still, these are huge numbers. So yeah, the closer we get to the finish line, the more things that are happening all at once, everything, everywhere, all at once. But also the resistance is going to increase.
Yeah,
you expected that. It's like football. The closer you get to the touch, the goal line for the winning touchdown, the defense gets tougher. So this is not surprising. It's very hard to keep up with, but all of this is just confirmation that the truth embargo is essentially done. It just doesn't know it yet. The people that were been maintaining the truth embargo have lost. They don't know it yet. And so these relatively sad efforts to try to thwart it, like the Arrow study report and so forth, are mostly just embarrassing. They will not prevent the inevitable.
Well, if you've got the disclosure team attacking and the defense on the touchline, how dirty and malicious could those tactics get to stop the ball going over just one last time?
Let's just say that the Arrow study report was not really malicious so much as it was silly. It was an attempt to do what they did in '69 with the Condon report. The gutting of the bill was realpolitik. Vicious, I don't know, but serious politics, and they were able to gut the bill for now. Of course, Schumer indicated he was going to probably reintroduce it anyway, and then Robert Garcia introduced a portion of that bill focusing on the review panel. Of course, the majority leader of the House killed that right away. But the point is, you see, it's not going to go away. I mean, there's no way it's going to go away. So malicious, the only thing that's potentially malicious is that there are still a lot of death threats being tossed around. Elizondo says he's getting them. In fact, he recently went public and made a point that he's not suicidal, which is something that people do in a situation like that. I'm not suicidal, so if I suddenly fly off a balcony, I didn't jump. And sad that you have to do that, but there are death threats all over the place. I mean, right now, as our society is slowly unraveling and our politics has gone rancid, threatening people with death is almost a national pastime. And that includes members of Congress, judges, witnesses, you name it. And it includes people involved in the UAP disclosure effort. Grush is apparently still getting the odd death threat. It's also the case, though, that in this time, it's really easy to threaten people. There's more ways to do it. And with a little thought, you can disguise it. You can kind of hide. Others who don't give it much thought will get discovered pretty quickly and they'll get prosecuted. But it's really easy to threaten people with death. And the politics is so awful, and people are feeling less inhibited. So to what degree is this malicious blowback by the last-ditch truth embargo people? Or to what degree is it just another artifact about if you don't like something going on, threaten to kill somebody? Not clear. Now, if anybody gets harmed, if anything really bad happens to any key witness that isn't absolutely an accident, I can assure you the internet will pay real close attention to that, and the media will cover that, and there will be a ton of articles written. And so whoever's behind it probably is going to have a real bad time. And so I would encourage anyone in government even thinking about that to think twice, because it will probably result in your disgrace, the end of your, productive life, the end of any legacy you might have. So don't do it. But and I assure you, thanks to the internet, anybody in this area, in any country, anywhere that gets harmed in a way that's suspicious, it will be known within 48 hours.
Stephen, let's move on to listener questions. We've covered a lot of ground in the last kind of hour and 15 minutes or so, albeit people might know by now we've done this over 2 separate sittings because the first part's out already. Folks might notice that I've changed clothes at least, and your background's a little bit different.
It's fine. That's good.
Folks will know. But listen, loads of response, Stephen. Huge response. So let's get through some of these. They're going to jump all over. First question from Algo asks, are there accounts of non-human intelligence exerting influence over the US government? And does Stephen give any credibility to such claims?
I have seen absolutely no proof of this. Now, it is in play. Anything that anybody kind of comes up or sees something that may be interpreted that way, they assert it. I get that. If extraterrestrials are here and the government knows it, the potential for direct engagement is there. Now, and the bodies. We also know that some were alive. There was at least one at Roswell that was alive. All right. Is that engagement? No. But it is direct contact between government and ET, as opposed to some person who happens to be subject to their work, their research, that is a contactee or abductee. That's different. In terms of formal arrangements, treaties, understanding, the evidence is not there, though you have this thread regarding the Great Treaty, the supposed Great Treaty involving Eisenhower way back. I get it. The evidence for it is pretty thin, but there's enough there that it's had a life. All right. The evidence for arrangements, deals, things like that, speculation. Now, I'm not dismissing them. I assure you, you can't dismiss this out of hand. But the activist process is not served by speculations. In other words, if you're trying to get something done, if you're trying to get the government to take certain action, if you're trying to get people to support a process which will force the government to do the right thing, any speculations undermines your effort, right? And it's a pitfall that activists can fall into. So why? In other words, you're trying to get people to follow or get involved in this process to get the government to do something. And in order to entice them, you put out a lot of very exotic speculations about, about this, what about that, and what have you, in order to get them riled up. But a lot of people see through that. A lot of people realize, no, that is not fact. That's simply hype in a sense, hyperbole, even propaganda. And so propaganda does not make for good activism. So for activists to be successful, you've got to stay as close to Occam's razor as you can. You need to stay in the middle of the fairway, right? Don't take out the long club when a 4-iron down the middle will do just fine. And that way, it's easier for people to stick with the program. And so it's not that I just dismiss all of these side theories out of hand. I don't. But the fact is that until we get disclosure and formal confirmation from our president and every other president and leader in the world, which would happen quite quickly once it breaks open, until we get that, we're not going to be able to really run these things down and eliminate them. Oh yeah, that's true. That's not. That's true. Until we get disclosure, we're swimming in an ocean of water far too deep with speculation. We need to stay in the shallow end of the pool and get the job done, and then we will be able to swim into the deep end and maybe get some results.
I was going to ask a question that requires a little bit of speculation, but I don't know if I should after what you've just said. Off the back of your comments, the idea that there's potential contact between an AT civilization and our government just through a crash or a crash retrieval.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think any ET civilization understands our way of working enough that any crashes they assume would be recovered by a leadership or a government as we know it? Or do you think an ET civilization gifting these craft potentially are expecting humanity, quote unquote, to have recovered the craft and, you know, work our way with the technology as a whole rather than it be hidden away, squirreled away and covered up?
Okay, speculation, right? I have no idea. Only the ETs can answer that question. Here's what we know, right? There have been crashes, all right, which means they can crash. Exactly why they crash, speculation. Some witnesses have claimed we shoot them down. That's not unreasonable, okay? And others, the indications are that in other cases that they can crash. This is very important. If they can crash, that means that they have. And by the way, you're talking about multiple groups, and so some groups may be more advanced than the others. You may have some that would never crash it, but some have, and so that shows that they're not gods. We know that the beings die, so they're not gods. And I think the evidence is that certainly some of them are living entities. It's possible that some are some sort of bioengineered thing or somewhat robotic, not sure. But the ones at Roswell stunk up that hospital pretty thoroughly. So I'm going to go living entity. Certainly in that case, I think the evidence is for that. It makes it more sense. And so here's something else we know. These things crash and they don't get retrieved, which doesn't mean there hasn't been a crash that they've retrieved. We don't know that. What we do know, there have been crashes when they don't retrieve them. So for whatever reason, and I would think they have the capability of doing that. It's not a stretch to think that. And so they are content with us capturing or actually examining that craft. That's fairly straightforward. They don't recover the beings as well that are dead in that craft or living. Well, let me this way. In not every case. They may have in some cases, but not aware of that. But we know that they, in many cases, don't do that. Is that deliberate? Don't know. Are the crashes deliberate? Don't know. Are they content to have us studying those wrecks and maybe even reverse engineering? Obviously, yes. I mean, so this, again, I'm reflecting how you go through these things and you pick what is obvious, right? You identify what you can't be certain about, but you identify that it could be in play and so forth, and thus try to stay as grounded as possible as you examine any thread related to the ET issue.
Next question from Anonymous, and a bit more of a skeptical look here. Stephen, is the extraterrestrial hypothesis reductive? If we take at face value, the frequency of sightings is statistically alarming. Furthermore, spontaneous crashes feel improbable. If something non-human is going on, and to be honest, I don't believe it is, I'd bet it would be more complex and fundamental than we could imagine or comprehend. The suggestion that the US government holds alien spacecraft in bodies feels simplistic and implausible to me. What's your perspective?
I disagree. First of all, there's nothing complex about our radar or visual sightings from airplanes seeing craft able to seemingly negotiate at 10, 15, 20,000 miles an hour. There's nothing complex about that. That's faster than we can go. Okay, very simple. All right. In terms of crashes in vehicles that crashed, we just got firsthand testimony to it. Tons of firsthand testimony to it, starting with Roswell, which has been studied more than probably any other event like it ever. Hundreds of witnesses have been interviewed, and as far as I'm concerned, Carey and Schmidt locked it down once and for all. I mean, plenty of books were written, Friedman, Randall, plenty, but the Carey Schmidt Witness to Roswell book is case closed. It's done. Anybody that reads that and thinks, no, it's not, well, what can I say? You'll never believe anything, no matter what's put in front of you. So Roswell is an example of a crash and so forth. So this is not hyperbole. It's not a stretch at all. In terms of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, look, recently another scientist posted on this, commenting on it in a somewhat favorable way. And I think the statement was, there are probably 1 trillion life developing planets in our galaxy. And understand the galaxy is at least 13, well, I forget how many billion years. It's up in that range, 13 billion years, which means God knows how many have come and gone. All right. So the idea that the only life developing planet is the Earth is about as absurd as anything anybody could state, based on powerful numbers. I mean, there's a lot of absurdity out there, and this is not an awful absurdity, but in terms of just the degree of absurdity, yeah, it's ridiculous. Okay. And so there are countless life planets out there, more than we could visit in 1,000,000 years. Now, not all of them are going to develop spacefaring civilizations, but the idea that we're the only one, absurd. Right? And so if entities are here that were not born here, then they are from elsewhere. And there are 3 possibilities. Elsewhere meaning another planet, another time, another dimension. Now, the evidence for another planet is incredibly strong based on the sheer numbers, right? Based on things we're learning about the universe, about Goldilocks planets and everything else. I mean, every year that goes by, we get more and more confirmation that other Earths are absolutely out there in droves. The evidence that's accumulating for time-traveling ETs is minuscule. It's barely measurable. The evidence for interdimensional ETs, minuscule. Certain things are kind of interpreted, right, as extra-dimensional, but not based on evidence. It's just based upon lack of understanding. So when contactees report that an ET can walk through their bedroom wall, that's pretty significant. That's pretty cool. It's magic almost. Some would interpret that as, well, they're clearly multiple dimensional. That's a big leap. What you know is they can move through a solid object in some way because they have some technology that allows them to do that, right? Multidimensionality is not at the top of the list of the explanations. And so it simply comes down to this, Occam's razor. Now, by the way, just to add to it, right, and this is not case closed, but the ETs tell contactees they're from other stars. They tell them. Now, maybe they're all lying. Maybe every incidence of that being reported is a lie. They're just trying to humor them. We're really from the future, but that would upset you. So we're just going to tell you from the star system. In ancient times, when you look into the lore, which is what Ancient Aliens was created for, thank you, Kevin Burns, a genius and a great man. So sorry he left us. Nothing has examined the relationship between ancient archaeology and civilizations and this issue than Ancient Aliens program, of which there have been hundreds now. The universities could have done it, but no, they're deathly afraid of the issue because they might lose some grant funding, or they just hate being embarrassed. So that left it to Ancient Aliens and Kevin Burns, God bless them. And they have done an unbelievable job in exploring every possibility. Now, many of these threads will not hold out. Ancient alien theorists will say no. But I know with almost complete certainty that some of the ancient knowledge, lore, and evidence that has been put forth on that show will hold out. Now, what does that mean? It means that ETs have engaged us when we were not spacefaring, not a global civilization, but rather just early civilizations, pretty limited. Okay? And once you accept that, then you have to go one step further, because when you look at that evidence and the lore, you find that these visitors of ancient times tell our ancient ancestors we're from other stars, right? So, I mean, when somebody tells you where they're from, I'm suggesting you believe them. Now, but there is one more complicating factor here. How these civilizations, and it may vary from one to another, engage the planet is not obviously clear. Do they come and go a lot? Right? They're star to star. Obviously, it doesn't take them 20,000 years. They've got a way around relativity. Maybe it takes months. I don't know. The point is, did they just come and go? Or do they have bases? Right? And if they have bases, do they have them in our solar system, on behind the other side of the moon, Mars, whatever? Do they have bases on Earth? The evidence points that they have bases. The bases on the moon and other parts of the solar system, the evidence is very limited, though there's some suspicion there, and there's a lot of photographs that apparently keep getting pixelated, right, before they're put public. But in terms of the Earth, a lot of contactees talk about being taken somewhere that is not inside a craft. They're almost certain it's inside what would amount to a base. And so I happen to believe that the evidence is relatively compelling that the extraterrestrials, one or species, maybe more, have bases on this planet. Bases that are hard to get to, obviously. All right. Where would they be? Under a mountain? Really hard to get to. Well under the seabed floor? Very hard to get to. Right. These would be the two that come to mind. Right. You're not going to put one, I don't know, above ground somewhere in in Oklahoma. You're not going to do that. And so the evidence for these bases is there. It's being reported by contactees, and sightings have shown them. Well, going into the ocean, that has become much more common now. We've gotten much more information about USOs, unidentified submerged objects. They spend a lot of time down there. Why? Well, first of all, it's hard to see them, but also if they have bases under the sea floor, well, in order to get to them, got to go into water. We have evidence and sightings of them going into mountains, right into the mountain. No hole, just right into the mountain. So if they have bases, and I think they do, it's easy for people to confuse. That's not the same thing as having always lived here on Earth, right? In other words, they evolved along with us, but they were very shy. And they like to just, they built underground facilities and they just keep out of the limelight, only turn up once in a while. Or they were very primitive, but over the years, they've gotten really sophisticated. This is the whole Aquaman, franchise scenario. I don't buy that. If we were exploring other solar systems and we found planets with life and developing even civilizations, and we wanted to keep an eye on it, what would we do? We would set up a base if we could, right? Rather than have to keep coming and going and coming and going, depending on how involved we wanted to be. And so they have bases. So while they have bases, people, I think, are confusing their presence that way, long-term presence, as they've always lived here. It's a simple mistake, intellectual mistake. But always living here and having bases that they utilize when necessary are not the same thing. So that's my down the middle of the fairway approach to that subject.
Within that answer, you've answered another question for UFOU around the idea of being under the water, why they may be there. So thank you for that as well. Couple of questions from Peter. Peter asks, well, Peter sent in about 7 questions. I've picked a couple of them.
Okay.
That's quite conservative for Peter, to be honest. So it's increasingly clear that several senior figures in the intelligence, military, and political communities are quite simply lying and possibly committing criminal actions. Does Stephen feel the only way to move the conversation forward and formally disclose and acknowledge the truth is a full amnesty for all such people?
When this person is referring to lying, I think he's saying that there are people that work in our government that are lying about the ET presence, meaning there's nothing here. That's what he means. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, this is the truth embargo, and misrepresentation, misinformation, disinformation, even coercion, manipulation, everything they've done from the beginning is essentially legal under the National Security Act, 47, and anything else they've passed. There could be some presidential directives, God knows. This is a major national security issue. Even if you are convinced that the ETs are fundamentally not hostile, which is, I believe, where I'm at, though they do things which are awkward, to say the least, that doesn't mean it's not a national security issue, right? It's like just because people are driving up and down the street and you're pretty sure they have no intent to run you over doesn't mean that one of them could have a nervous breakdown and run you over, right? In other words, there's threat, there's potential threat. And so given how little, if anything, was known in the 40s when you had the Roswell event, and given the nuclear threat that was already well underway by then, heading towards what they knew could be another nuclear Cold War, the presence of ETs was a major national security matter in the minds of any reasonable person in our government and other governments. And so it has been treated that way ever since. The fact that the national security implications, I believe, have lessened and lessened over the decades doesn't change the fact that that's how it was treated and is still treated. And under that aegis, now, you're not lying. I mean, you're not breaking the law, right? Hell, almost all intelligence and even warfare is about deception and so forth. So I don't support that idea because it doesn't help. It doesn't help to yell at people and say you're a criminal and you're evil and that kind of thing. All it does is alienate them. I do get mad from time to time, though, and sometimes I get a little irritated and I go in that direction, but I try not to. What is happening, of course, is that the truth is coming out. People are coming forward. The witnesses are coming forward. A number of things have happened, lowering the bar for witnesses to come forward, but not for everyone. Recently, it has been reported by Danny Sheehan and perhaps others that Mark Warner has let it be known privately, he's not giving a press conference or anything, that he wants to have a hearing. Thank God for that. I want him to have a hearing. I'm desperate for him to have a hearing. The Senate Intel Committee is the way to disclosure. A major hearing. I mean, no doubt about it. Fundamental hearing, many witnesses, seen by millions of people in a nonpartisan setting where they're under oath with established and known credentials. Boom. That lays the platform for the president to disclose and end this embargo, and we can move forward. Okay, so we desperately want it. But apparently Warner, as a matter of risk aversion, really, if he's going to have a hearing, he wants some absolute firsthand, hands-on people. He wants people in there that are actually working on those ET vehicles, or autopsying those. I get it, but that's not necessary. The witnesses that are able to testify are of such high rank and station to significant events like the shutdown of our nuclear missiles, right? You've got strategic air command officers that were there when it happened, not once, but a number of times. They've been wanting to testify for 30, 40 years. And so, what? I mean, how many high-ranking people with impeccable careers telling you things that are extraordinary does it take to finally end this truth embargo? But obviously, when it comes to politics in our era, everybody's risk averse because it costs a fortune to run for office. You have to raise hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Thus, you become beholden to the funders. Therefore, you got to satisfy them, and they don't want you to do anything. And you don't want to lose your job. And so we're overly risk averse, which is one of the reasons why we can't fix anything in this country. And so I understand Mark Warner's concern. Fine. But here's the second problem. Apparently, it is known that the hands-on witnesses, the ones that are right there in the USAP program, still don't think that the whistleblower laws, and I say whistleblowers, let's just say the fundamental witness protection laws, because these people are not, at least I'm not, in general, I'm not, and I think most of the activists are not, wanting them to just literally break every law, come running out and spill the beans. They want them to come forward as witnesses and not be whistleblowers, because you don't want, if it's avoidable, you do not want to be a whistleblower. So there's witness protections that are being created, some in the laws that have already been passed. There's been an effort to get stronger laws, but right now the politics is not allowing them. And so these firsthand witnesses are not comfortable enough yet. So they don't want to come forward. So as long as Warner's position is, I want the actual firsthand people, we're not going to get that hearing. And that is a blunder on his part. Let me be clear. This is a huge mistake. He needs to have that hearing. If he has that hearing, and the witnesses, where I consider someone that was at a SAC base when the missiles were turned off is pretty damn firsthand. When he has that hearing, more witnesses will come forward. And then after disclosure, well, they'll be coming forward in droves. And plus there'll be more legislation. And so he's got a key, almost historic decision to make. This is not so much a criticism. I'm trying to acknowledge how tough this is. But the most important advances in the history of our society has come when individuals in spots like this make the decision that what is right transcends what is prudent, and do what has to be done and let history decide their fate. These moments are not common, but they happen. And Mark Warner, Senator Warner, a good man, a righteous man, is sitting exactly in the chair when this moment is taking place. And all I can say is I hope that he makes the right decision and calls that hearing as soon as possible, because in addition to, well, let me put it this way, concomitant with this disclosure process is an unfolding series of events which are increasingly convincing some of the most thoughtful and knowledgeable politicians in this country and academics that we are closing in on nuclear war. He's got a tough call. And all I can say is that any journalist to hear my words, write about this. Any activist that can have some influence, write about this. Any member of Congress that agrees with this, talk to him, talk to his aides. There are a number of committees in Congress that could hold a hearing. The House wants to hold another one, but that's not the hearing that we have to have. We have got to have the Senate Intel Committee. Now, if they wanted to pass it to the Armed Services Committee of the Senate, that would do. All right, the Armed Services Committee is a pretty important national security committee. And if 20 witnesses testified before that in the manner that I expect that they can, that would end it as well. But the Senate Intel Committee is where all four of the legislations that have been passed, the only legislations ever passed, came out of, right? Schumer's bill was essentially in conjunction with the Senate Intel Committee. They have written letters supporting this and all signed. We're talking about 17 members, both Democrat and Republican. And so the idea you want to pass it to another committee now, it's not acceptable. So we are facing incredible geopolitical circumstances, which, if you look back in history, just mirror the lead up years to World War I and the lead up years to World War II way too close. The comparisons are much too obvious. And so I consider the situation now existential. It's not just about getting disclosure. It's about not having a nuclear war. And I've said this for 20 years, except now I'm really starting to believe myself. All right. We're in an absolute critical time in history. This is not a time to be risk averse about the truth. You want to be risk averse about doing stupid stuff. All right. And the amount of stupid stuff happening now between countries is really rather remarkable, but not risk averse about doing the right thing.
Follow up then from Peter. Does Stephen believe disclosure will be only of the existence of a non-human intelligence, or will it include reverse engineering efforts made by the US or other countries, the success they've had, or even the reality of the abduction experience and what it means for humanity?
Understand. Look, I take full responsibility for this confusion. It's my fault, right? I'm the one that came up with the proper noun disclosure, capital D. Okay. All right. In order to create, as I've said many times, a prize at the end of the race for the activist movement, something to shoot for, something to accomplish. So it's just not, starting a let's have peace on earth movement, I'm afraid doesn't work very well, right? Just doesn't. So yeah, everybody wants it. When? 10,000 years. To have an activist movement, you got to have a specific target. And I said, create that target. I define that target. Disclosure, capital D, proper noun, has only one definition. It's like Christmas has one definition. It is the day we celebrate, or people celebrate, the birth of Christ. Okay? All right. Very clear, very defined, right? It's not the birth of anybody else. It's the birth of Christ. That's it. Same thing with disclosure. Disclosure, capital D, is one thing and one thing only as I've defined it. And I think more and more people are accepting. It is the confirmation of this non-human presence in our world by the heads of state of nations, almost certainly starting with one head of state first, and then very quickly being confirmed by all the others. That's disclosure, capital D. That is what we're trying to get. We've been having small d disclosure from day one. When they put out the press release at the Army Air Force Base, Walter Haut put that out. That was disclosure, small d. They put out a press release. Hey, we got a crashed vehicle here. We got one of those saucer thingies, right? That's disclosure. All the research and the documentaries that have come forward, that's small d disclosure. Files that have been released by the FBI and the CIA, which you can find online right now that have references to the UFO issue, that's disclosure. All of that is disclosure. It's been going on for 77 years of small d disclosure. But it didn't achieve capital D disclosure. Why? Because capital D disclosure is not about how much proof you have. It's about a political decision to undo an earlier political decision. It is about politics. And so if we get capital D disclosure, questioner, I can assure you that the amount of small d disclosure that will take place will increase rather profoundly. And not only that, it will be more accurate, meaning we won't have to spend 10 years speculating about something and then finally maybe figure it out. We'll be getting the truth. The truth will be confirmed quickly, and we'll move on to more truth. That's the way science works, and that's the way this has to work, right? Speculation, game playing, disinformation, and propaganda simply leads a society into the shit can. Okay? Truth, scientific method, confirmation, honesty takes a society forward. It's not that complicated. Now, huge numbers of our citizenry and many institutions have lost sight of that. And as a result, we're kind of wandering in the desert like the Jews did for 40 years, right? Trying to cross the River Jordan, which in my metaphor would be capital D disclosure.
Good answer. Question following up on how people can help in that then from Jacob. Is it important to try and organise in-person disclosure rallies? If so, how would you go about organising such events? Thinking a few months ago, we had the event outside Chuck Schumer's office that was arranged, wasn't it? had quite a small number attending, but I think it was put together quite last minute, and there wasn't a huge amount of notice for folks to make it there.
Sure. Well, some people in front of Chuck Schumer's office is not a rally. It's they did that. That's fine. But here's the simple truth. This issue does not lend itself and will not be helped by rallies, demonstrations, marches, and so forth. And some people, it's hard for them to get that. I understand. It's I consider the most important issue in the world. So why not 10 million people? No. It would be like, what's an analogy? It would be like, let's say that when relativity was initially announced by Einstein, it wasn't received right away, even though it was unbelievably important. Virtually a new way of looking at space and time and the universe. Profoundly, it's one of the great paradigm shifts of all time. But it wasn't immediately received. A lot of scientists said this is nonsense. It's crazy. Could you have gotten like 1 million people to march on Prague or whatever the hell, protesting that relativity is not being properly received? No, of course not. People go to the streets regarding issues that are very personal, very the word I'm looking for is not there yet. Maybe it'll come back.
Emotive.
So in other words, if you're talking about racial injustice, people go to the streets. If you're talking about abuse of police power or people are being killed, people go to the streets. If you're talking about the rights of people, they go to the streets. Okay. If you're talking about a massive abuse of power where a president is rounding up people and putting them in stadiums, like you've seen in some countries, people go to the streets. These are the issues. But the issue of an extraterrestrial presence, which is fundamentally a kind of a science-based thing, it's a truth, it's important. The truth embargo is denying that truth. But, the Cuba embargo is basically denying the ability to go to Cuba. It's a political decision. It's kind of important to the people in Cuba. In the United States, not so much. Can you get massive rallies about that? No, but it's a little easier to get some people to rally. But in terms of a truth embargo and the ET presence, no. And every effort to put them together, they don't go anywhere. I'm not criticizing those that try. It just doesn't work. It's not going to work. This does not lend itself to that. What I invite people to do is to engage the politics of this. And right now we have a lead organization that has been in development, pre-development for a long time, but finally is up and going and launched. And that, of course, is the New Paradigm Institute, which is chaired by Danny Sheehan and a very substantial staff and advisors. It is the real deal. It has raised decent money. It will raise many millions more. The New Paradigm Institute at newparadigminstitute.org has multiple activist programs going on. PRG has a few things, but PRG is small. The New Paradigm Institute is big, all right? And so right now, it's the leading activist entity, which I'm happy to support in any way I can. And so they gave out, the New Paradigm Institute gave out the phone number of both of the CNN journalists that are going to be doing the debate in 2 days to, I think, 100,000 people. And so they're getting a lot of phone calls. That's activism, okay? But they are doing other things. They're helping to write legislation and so forth. Support it. Look, if you're one of those billionaires out there that actually wants to help the world, and they are out there, you seriously want to think about giving millions of dollars to the New Paradigm Institute. It is going to be the premier think tank in the post-disclosure world. And it is in a position right now to advance the now. But what we need is one of those billionaires, like the ones that like to, go into orbit once in a while and float, whatever. But really serious people that want to make the world a better place, they need to start focusing their attention on the most important issue in the world today and the entities that are trying to resolve it. New Paradigm Institute, numero uno. So you got a couple of 100 million laying around, or even 10 million. Donate it to the New Paradigm Institute. Take the nice tax deduction. It's a 501c3. If you got a little left over, Paradigm Research Group is also a nonprofit now, waiting on a 501c3 clearance with the IRS. Could use a little too here. And there's the UAP Disclosure Fund that's been set up by Gary Nolan. That could use some funding. How about the Soul Foundation, also set up by Gary Nolan? Scientific think tank, that could use some funding. Fund the entities that are either trying to get disclosure and engage the post-disclosure world, or engage the post-disclosure world. That's what we need. If 1 billion people gave $10 to each of these entities, it would literally profoundly transform this process right now, right? But the government has spent decades convincing the American people, oh, no, don't give $10 to that. There are no ETs here. We're all alone in the universe. All that's a lie. It's a joke. People wearing tinfoil hats trying to bilk you out of your money. This is what the government has sold for 70 some years, and to some degree still is. Don't buy it. The government has lied to you for national security reasons. It's misrepresented for national security reasons. It's still pressing back for national security reasons. But the truth embargo is going to end. And the sooner it gets support, not just from a few people, but from millions of people in this country and elsewhere, though right now the focus on the US, then the sooner we'll get disclosure and move on with civilization.
Going to ask you a question from Purple Rain, all the way out in Vienna. So thank you for the question. I'd love to know Vienna. I'd love to know from Stephen.
Wait a minute, is that the country or is that Virginia?
No, I think from the name. I won't read the name because they've got like a pseudonym online. Okay. But I'm guessing from the name it's Vienna. It'll be Austria.
Cool.
Just won
their Euro. Hi, Austria. How you doing?
Yeah, they're having a good night. I would like to know from Stephen what this has hypothesis to a best and worst case scenario about what non-human intelligence intentions would be.
It's a good question. It's one of the questions that the government's going to be asked very shortly after disclosure that is dreading have to answer, right? They don't want to have to answer any tough questions. They just want to make some money, get that free parking, have a little power, enjoy their lives, right? Join the country clubs and everything, not have to answer brutally difficult questions. I feel so sorry for them. Worst case scenario, complete destruction of a human civilization, which they could do without even breaking a sweat. Second worst case scenario, essentially enslaving the human civilization, taking it over, doing with it what it wants to whatever measure it wants, and the needs and wants of human beings or any other animal on this planet would be irrelevant. That's second best. Third best, a kind of a subjugation from inside out, meaning they are exercising lots and lots of control through intimidation and what have you, and slowly affecting our society in any way it wants to without actually having to be too open about it. That would be the third worst case scenario. Fourth worst case scenario is they simply need us for certain things and they harvest things. They take advantage of us like we go out and harvest the redwoods. We still leave some trees behind, whatever, and they're just harvesting us in a sense in various ways, but without dominating, taking over control. We're just like a garden they need to get to and take things from time to time. Those are the four worst case scenarios off the top of my head. I can probably think of a few more, but that's bad enough. Do I think any of those are true? No. The one that has the most, how would you say, some substance is the harvesting thing. I get it. Given the contact that's taking place and what the contactee abductees are reporting, it kind of looks like that a little bit. But that's not quite the degree that I was referring to. One of the things we need to find out post-disclosure, certainly post-open contact, which I think follows pretty quickly within a year or two, is why the contact, why the abductions, why the genetic work, and certainly why the hybrids. And this is worth knowing. The answer may shock us. On the other hand, the answer might be, oh, I get it. Who knows? But there's enough there to that fourth scenario needs to be looked at closely, and I get that. Best case scenario, I've talked about it many times. It goes like this. Boy, and this will be the shortest way I've ever said this. Let's see if I can set a record. Okay. We finally, build atom bombs and drop them on our own people. Not good, right? And start the process of a nuclear Cold War and building thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons and putting them on missiles, thus threatening the entire human civilization. Not good, right? The ETs are following this, watching this, and realize not good. And so they're also facing the prospect that we may develop starships, which we're working on already. And if we do, we'll put the bombs on them, head on out there, and become a threat to the whole damn galaxy. Not good. And so a whole process begins of engagement under some protocols that they're using, in which they're becoming more and more known, more and more active, doing things like turning off our missiles, being seen here, there, whatever, also doing some side work that they need to do. And so we have this extraordinary 77-year period that ultimately leads to disclosure, which the ETs are certainly helping along. It's not like they're standing in the way, not really. And so disclosure means formal confirmation worldwide of the ET presence. Everybody knows, everybody gets it. Thus, that is then followed by open contact. Open contact means they're talking to us, we're talking to them, and we're getting transcripts. Maybe it's a Zoom call if you get to watch. I don't know, but it's open contact, and serious matters are being discussed. The matters include the nuclear weapons issue, which is clearly on the table. Based on understandings between us and the ETs and certain things that they require, if we intend to leave the solar system anytime soon, we get rid of the nukes. Full disarmament. I say full nuclear elimination. No nukes whatsoever. Doesn't mean we get rid of all the weapons, but we get rid of the nukes. This leads to more engagement with the ETs, which includes technology share. Well, technology gifts. There's nothing we can share with them by and large. And that technology, which comes either from them after open contact or emerges out of the re-engineering and scientific programs that have been sequestered under USAPs because of the truth embargo. And that leads to profound new changes in how we can deal with ourselves and our planet, solving a lot of problems. And so not that many years from now, no nukes, new technology, major problem solved, star travel developed by within this century, maybe within the next 25 years, and some sort of arrangements and understandings with non-human civilizations, making us literally part of, if not maybe at least an apprentice to, some sort of, quote, galactic federation. That's the best case scenario. And guess what? That is the scenario I think that is most likely. And I'm saying that every chance I get. Can't guarantee it. Just trying to lay it out there. It's not science fiction. I don't write science fiction books. This is a common sense extrapolation of what probably will happen based upon everything we have learned. And the government has learned, and in some cases leaked to us, since the Roswell crash of July of 1947. It's a standard extrapolation of that, all right, based upon what we know. Now, does that mean it's true? No. Does that mean there's stuff we don't know that would blow that scenario wide open? Absolutely. I'm just saying that, like, hey, barring disclosure and the government actually starting to tell the damn truth, we've got to connect the dots as best we can. And when I'm asked the question, connect the dots for the best case scenario, that's my answer.
I think with that answer, Stephen, that's a really nice place to leave it. You've been really good with your time for me and the listeners, as always, as well. Is there anything you want to mention before we head off into the sunset?
Yeah, I want to remind people that there are some organizations now that are already building to try to address the post-disclosure world and help advance the disclosure process so we can get confirmation from the president. NewParadigmInstitute.org, support it. Soul Foundation, support it. UAP Disclosure Fund, support it. Paradigm Research Group, I'd appreciate some support, right? Right now, the website is not set up for contributions, but it will soon be, there will soon be a GoFundMe page. And as soon as I convert the website to Think Tank Zone, which is what PRD is about to become now that it's a nonprofit, at least in Washington, waiting IRS nonprofit status. Yeah, I could use a little support too. And support other events that are out there. The conferences that are still here post-pandemic, support them. Go attend. The premier conference, the Contact in the Desert, just took place. It was pretty big, pretty astounding, but it continues to need support. It's very expensive. Contactinthedesert.com. I'm sure they'll have the new dates up very soon, and their wonderful website. So we want to support that. There are, and then there are initiatives at the New Paradigm website, not just financial support, but join those initiatives, which are contacting members of Congress. I've got a couple initiatives myself, like ShiftStorm, which is on my website, where you can learn how to send lots and lots of tagged Twitter messages to certain key members of the Senate, Schumer, Rubio, and Warner, asking for those hearings. It's kind of a narrow-casted thing, but it's up there, right? So you can do that. ShiftStorm.org and so forth. And there's others that are turning up. I cannot keep track of all the new organizations that are forming. I cannot keep track of all the articles that are being published. I cannot keep track of all the developments, let alone all of the YouTube videos. I mean, when they said that the revolution will be televised, okay, disclosure will be YouTubed. The amount of videos that are being generated, small, medium, and large, that are being put up on social media platforms that ultimately end up on YouTube, that are now being tagged by Google and Google Alerts, it would take hundreds of hours a month for me to follow these, to watch them. It's impossible. And so this thing is exploding. All right. And so I invite people to try to pay attention, take advantage of this, take advantage of the print media archive at my website, Paradigm Research Group, which is putting up hundreds and hundreds of articles in real time as they are posted. Just put up 150 just a couple of days ago. You can literally read in the journalist coverage what's going on. They're not hiding anything, right? Now, they're not coming out and publishing. Well, I mean, we had some gun camera footage back in 2017. They're not digging in the Pentagon trash and coming up with super new special stuff, but they're covering everything that's going on, particularly the politics. Hundreds and hundreds of articles at all the major mainstream press worldwide. I track the English language. I can't track the foreign press. So you can just go to the paradigmresearchgroup.org, resources, print media archive, go in, get to the archive and read this stuff. You can literally follow this whole thing covering the journalistic coverage. People say, the journalists are not covering. That's not true. They're pretty much unhinged. They're not hinged, but they're unshackled now. Not only that, but the stigma regarding UFO, the term UFO, UAP, ET, the stigma is almost completely gone. All of this coverage is without ridicule or stigma. There's some still. But overall, it's being treated like the Ukraine war. So that's available at Paradigm Research Group. It's one of my most important resources. And one reason you may want to support Paradigm Research Group as soon as I can get the damn GoFundMe up. So that's it. That's my message for today. And again, Andy, thank you so much. I am a huge fan of the podcast revolution. I am available on short notice. I'll do a podcast at the drop of a hat from anywhere I happen to be. And so tell your podcast buddies, call me. And even the high end ones, like Joe Rogan, give me a call, right? And what's the other fellow's name? Oh God, there's several. Suddenly,
You've got Joe Rogan. You've got Lex Friedman. Does pretty big.
Lex Friedman, call me, Lex. Please. And there's a number of others that are really high end podcasts. The redacted, the Wi files. They're really strong. And they haven't found me yet. And I've done nearly 2,000 interviews, so I'm pretty good at it. So I'm hoping they'll check in. Anyway, that's it for today, my friend. All right.
No, you're always a popular guest, Stephen. Thank you so much. And I'll certainly be chipping in a few dollars to support just for the amount of effort and time you've given me over the years. So All those links will be in the description. When you can support Stephen, please do reach out, because he puts in a lot of work, not just now, but over the years that have just gone and the years to come as well. So, Stephen, thank you so much, mate. That is all for this episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. Apple and Spotify do make a huge difference to the algorithm. If you're checking the show out on YouTube, please don't forget to like and leave a comment on here as well. Any sharing you do is very much appreciated on any social media platform. And finally, you can listen to shows ad-free and sponsor-free in their glorious full versions by subscribing for less than the price of a coffee on Apple, Spotify, just search That UFO Podcast Premium, YouTube, you can sign up and be a member, or you can do that through patreon.com. Thank you very much for listening, folks.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked a little grass.